70 years ago, the People's Republic of China was founded, marking the end of over 100 years of invasion and oppression. 70 years on, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, China is now the world's second largest economy, engaging actively with almost every country on Earth. In this special series, we explore China's development over the 7 decades, from political and economic development to diplomatic and military evolution. What are the theories and events that have shaped China's past? What are the trends and challenges that will forge China's future? I'm Robert Lawrence Kuhn. I've been coming to China for 30 years. I've witnessed astonishing changes. What do China's changes mean for the Chinese people and for the world? Watch our special series on Closer to China, 70 years and counting, China's new era and beyond. Behind me is Tiananmen Square, where 70 years ago, on October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China. China now has diplomatic relations with 180 countries. I am struck by the breadth and scope of China's engagement with the world. There is now no matter of global importance in which China does not participate. Moreover, China's diplomacy is increasingly proactive. The country is no longer content merely to respond to external events, circumstances, and pressures. It wasn't always this way. At different times, under different leaders, China's diplomatic positioning varied. What were the phases or epochs of China's diplomacy from 1949 to 2019? How to understand China's diplomatic transformation since 2012, when Xi Jinping became China's senior leader, including the vision of a community of a shared future for humanity and the Belt and Road Initiative. Why is Xi setting forth a grand vision of global governance? Why is she elevating the party in China's foreign affairs? In short, what is Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy, and what is its impact on China and on the world? What are its basic principles, its key components, its practical consequences? Why do some see China's emergence as a diplomatic actor as disrupting, even though China promotes joint consultation, win-win cooperation, and shared benefits? China's diplomacy brings us closer to China. Over the past 70 years, China has gone through several major stages: standing up, getting rich, and growing strong. And China's diplomacy has served as an extension of the country's domestic transformation. After its founding, China's diplomacy focused on allying with the former Soviet Union and other socialist countries. Later, during the first Asian-African Conference in 1955, the idea of 5 principles of peaceful coexistence was developed. Thereafter, China has been proactive in building mutual trust and deepening cooperation with other countries. And by following these principles, with the recently established diplomatic relations with the Solomon Islands and the resumption of China-Kiribati ties, the number of countries with which China has formal diplomatic relations has grown to 180. Yet of late, the world has been undergoing extraordinary changes, unseen in a century. To adapt to this new era, Xi Jinping Thought on Diplomacy was established as the fundamental guideline for China's diplomatic work. And to better explain China's current situation and its relation with the rest of the world, the State Council Information Office issued a white paper titled China and the World in the New Era. So if we look at these 70 years, are there different phases or stages or epochs that we can distinguish to look at this transformation of China's diplomacy?
就是实际上，这个 Over the past 70 years, we have gone through several major changes: stand up, get rich, and grow strong. Diplomacy serves as an extension of and builds upon domestic affairs. Diplomacy for the stand-up period was to serve the goal of standing up. That period usually refers to the establishment of the People's Republic of China until reform and opening up. One major task for diplomacy back then was to safeguard national independence. Like a people who stand up, we must stand steady and firm. It takes a process. In fact, it was to maintain our independence, self-reliance, and sovereignty. After reform and opening up, our priority was given to economic growth. Accordingly, diplomacy in that period was to serve economic development, which was also to provide a good international environment and sound external conditions. We looked more to the West, since the Western countries, including Japan, the U.S., the European powers, have technologies, capital, and management know-how, and could offer us great help on science and technology. Thus, diplomacy was basically to follow and serve such a grand goal.
During this time, when diplomacy was used to serve the grand goal of China's economic development, were there differences between that period of time and the previous period of time, and what were the diplomatic differences?
We adopted a non-alliance stance. China developed comprehensive relations with different types of states under an all-directions policy. In fact, it was to override the ideological differences. We were not setting lines based on ideology and not simply to develop relations with socialist countries. We were overriding differences in social systems and country types. We did not seek an alliance with any country, but focused on the overall goal of getting rich. The reform and opening up brought about a crucial process in which China integrated into the global system, or globalization.
As the third decade of the 21st century is about to begin, China faces new uncertainties in its external environment. China is involved in territorial disputes in the South China Sea, with overlapping claims among neighboring countries, including Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. Is China's actions aggressive or responsible? Trade and other frictions between China and the U.S. have been ongoing, and after the 13th round of trade talks, China and the U.S. reached a partial or Phase 1 agreement, but there seems a long way to a final deal. Xi Jinping Thought on Diplomacy is said to provide guidance on furthering China's foreign relations, including with major powers, neighboring countries, and developing countries. So how does a sophisticated diplomatic strategy handle these diverse and complex situations? How does China deal with that in a way that builds China's a global interest in the long term, so that China, which has said it never wants to become a hegemon country, but yet at the same time will not give up any of its rightful core interests in its own territory itself, when you have these multiple things? How does sophisticated diplomacy handle those situations?
There are some people who talk about this land reclamation, because the island is now in Filipino occupation. The only way taking the island back, probably you have to do it through force. That's not something China wants. And it seems that Duterte stretched out a friendly hand. China embraced him with a big hug. And China and the Philippines had friendly consultation and had worked out some economic cooperative programs. And then if we move the focus upward, of course, Taiwan is always a different situation. because China always regards Taiwan as one of our core interests. Even now, it's not going to be mixed with other like regional issues. Because even for U.S.-China relations, Taiwan relations is regarded as one of the red lines in a bilateral relationship. If we move up Korean Peninsula, China's policies are three-pronged. Number one, denuclearization, period. Number two, future prosperity, peace, the stability in the region. Number three, how to realize those goals through diplomatic and non-military means. And China and the U.S. has a certain convergence of interests regarding the Korean Peninsula settlement. And denuclearization is one thing U.S. and China both want. But on the third point, China says that the peaceful means only. U.S. says, well, all options are on the table. Because China's economy, if we want to proceed, we need to have world peace stability. We need and we must have regional stability.
Over the last couple of years, there has really been a shift among politicians, think tank experts, people who follow China, fairly dramatically to a feeling that the long future is not a cooperative partnership, but more a strategic competition, which is a vastly different perspective. And so how do you address that when you see this, what we call a sea change in the U.S. from hopefully a cooperative partnership to strategic competition?
The U.S. has indeed changed its perception of China, but I think it is worth discussing whether such changes are in line with U.S. interests. Since 2000, when China joined the international system and realized national growth with opportunities provided by globalization, the U.S. as a country that is always prepared for potential dangers has witnessed such a change and treats China more like a rival than a partner. Economic and trade links between China and the U.S. are quite strong. If they see China as an enemy or rival, they would no doubt treat us the way they treat an enemy or rival, including trade frictions between China and the U.S. and issues involving Taiwan. This would affect Sino-U.S. relations in a profound way. It is a paradox for the U.S. The U.S. believes China imposes greater competitive pressure on it because in the process of economic globalization, the U.S. faces more economic difficulties, not as strong as it used to be. Given that, the U.S. sees China as a rival. If you want to make the U.S. great again, however, would such a practice serve that goal? Here, I want to stress again that economic globalization is an objective law, not something that can be reversed by someone. It is a flow of personnel, materials, and capital, an objective trend independent of people's wishes, and also a reflection of a law on how things develop. If the U.S. defines China like that, for instance, by increasing tariffs on Chinese products, could that balance its temporary interests and long-term interests? Not necessarily. Many experts and scholars have written to President Trump to reflect on U.S. policy. I believe Sino-U.S. cooperation serves both countries. It is not rhetoric. President Trump is also a businessman. He knows the importance of cooperation. What if the global chain really breaks? In that case, China and the U.S. would not be the only ones to suffer.
The foreign critics would say that whereas China might not want to take over the whole world, which is kind of silly, they do want ultimately to have, if not a hegemony on its borders, at least the dominant players so that all of these border areas would be resolved in China's favor.
China will not take over the world. We are not capable of doing that. With 1.4 billion Chinese people, we have a lot of things to do on our own.
We know we are still a developing country. We have a long way to go to satisfy the demand and their design to make to enjoy a better and happy life. We have never had an intention to be a number one or to play a key role in all this global governance. We think we can play a constructive role. We can play a positive role. China is not a threat. China provides huge opportunities for the rest of the world. The more we develop, the bigger our economy would be, the big contribution we'll make to the world. I think that's something they have to understand. As someone which come from a very poor areas in the Chinese western part, I have a full understanding of how many poor people still are in China and how long we have to go to make China really strong. And so we have many people very rational, very sensitive to the poverty and many problems we're still facing. And our concentration always on how we can resolve those domestic issues instead of how we can become a number one or a bigger superpower in this world.
For China to take the path of peaceful development, others should also take this path. What would it be like if only China takes the peaceful road? If we encounter a road which deals a staggering blow to us, are we supposed to hit back? As for the development path, it is not only China to take the peaceful road, but for others as well. If we all walk toward the same direction, solutions will probably be found. Otherwise, if we all follow our own ways and only prioritize and pursue our self-interests, solutions would always be elusive.
President Xi made the remarks at the closing ceremony of the Global Governance Forum in Paris, co-hosted by China and France. He urged all countries to make concerted efforts and jointly shape the future of humankind in the face of severe global challenges. To fulfill President Xi's grand vision of building a shared future for all humanity, the Belt and Road Initiative plays a critical part in promoting interconnectedness and equality, especially by constructing infrastructure in developing countries.
The joint pursuit of the Belt and Road Initiative aims to enhance connectivity and practical cooperation. It's about jointly meeting the various challenges and risks confronting mankind and deliver win-win outcomes and common development.
Win-win means both sides win. What benefits does China gain from the Belt and Road Initiative? However, with China's increasing engagement in global affairs, some remain skeptical of China being a responsible nation. Hence, concerns about a China threat are raised. Is China really a threat to the world?
In 2012, the General Secretary in his report to the 18th National Party Congress said that China would act as a responsible stakeholder in global governance. This was for the first time in party documents when a responsible stakeholder was proposed. In the 13th five-year plan, a whole chapter was devoted to actively assuming international responsibilities and obligations, which had never appeared in previous five-year plans. These reflected our perception of China's changing status. We are positioned to take some international responsibilities.
The concern of a China threat. So what can China do to allay these kinds of concerns?
I remember when I took graduate courses back in the States, one professor was telling me that when you look at a politician speak, do not look at his mouth, just watch his butts, where he sits, where he stands. It seems that when you look at the participants of the Belt and Road, I would say that most people who have participated have felt that something tangible in their hand. People ask, who is the third largest producer of fiberglass? And if I tell you that it's Egypt, people probably will feel surprised, because nobody would probably think that Egypt would be the third largest supplier in the whole world of fiberglass, because China's big great stone company set up a factory there. It's a win-win situation between China, apparently, and the local the people, and between China and Egypt. As such, China says that Belt and Road is not a solo on the part of China.
China's vision of a global community with a shared future for all humanity is certainly attractive for everyone, but people ask, what is the benefit for China? And in specific, the Belt and Road Initiative, which undoubtedly is extraordinarily important for developing countries. One could argue it's the most important thing they need, and therefore China's expertise in building infrastructure is enormously valuable. But what's the benefit for China? People are suspicious if China says that everything it's doing is for the benefit of the world. Everybody does first what's benefit for themselves. So in terms of the global community with a shared future, in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative, how does China benefit from the success of this?
China's development pursues a virtuous interaction between China and the rest of the world. The Belt and Road Initiative focuses on interconnectivity. Why are we so interested in the interconnectivity of roads? It is based on our Chinese experience. There is a saying which goes, if you want to get rich, build roads first. With well-connected roads, when we export our Chinese products, the costs will drop. Chinese products are finding a way out. Over the past 40 years of reform and opening up, we mainly focus on bringing in. Now, with a great variety of products, we must find markets in the global community. In terms of the industrial chain, what countries are desirable markets for Chinese products? Most Chinese products are more desirable in developing countries, not the U.S., a market for more high-end products. That is why the Belt and Road Initiative involves more developing countries by helping them improve transportation and infrastructure. It helps China to develop ties with those countries, including doing business and encouraging entrepreneurs to go global. We intend to foster a virtuous circle between China and the rest of the world to grow together. Today's unbalanced world is a result of unbalanced and inadequate growth of developing countries. If they can grow strong, we may embrace a bigger global market with higher consumption capabilities and broader growth space, which is good for China, the U.S., and other countries. That is the starting point of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
President Xi stresses that diplomatic work should take national rejuvenation and promoting world peace and common development as its main tasks, strive to build a community with a shared future for humanity, and firmly safeguard the country's sovereignty, security, and development interests. coordinating and balancing this big vision with individual bilateral relations while protecting China's own interests can require thoughtful, careful work. China's diplomatic vision are these big ideas of global governance, multilateralism, but in fact the process of diplomacy is very much bilateral. China has bilateral relations with the U.S., with Russia, with India, with Japan, with countries all over the world, each of which has different kinds of interests. So globally speaking, how do you coordinate that from the overarching view of China's diplomatic leadership? How do you coordinate the big vision with the individual bilateral relationships?
At the bilateral level, there are also issues about rules. For each bilateral relation, mutual concerns will be resolved through consultations. Surely, rules governing bilateral relations are not supposed to contradict the norms of international rules. They should be aligned.
In a nutshell, Xi Jinping's diplomacy for the new era is that we want to maintain cooperation and consultation in all four areas, maintaining, in the first place, consultation and stable relations with major world powers, United States, Russia, Europe, and so on. The second area is that China needs to have a fraternal, good, reliable neighboring policies. And the third area is relationship with other developing countries. China needs to enhance relations, contacts. The last but not least is multi-diplomacy. And in the United Nations, World Bank, and AIIB, and Asia Development Bank, China wants to make as many partners as possible.
How to understand Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy? One way is three big concepts: a community of a shared future for all humanity, a new kind of big power relationship, and the enhanced role of the party in running foreign affairs. Another way is 8 big ideas: a community of a shared future, win-win cooperation, economic globalization, new kind of global governance, new kind of big power relationship, expanding cooperation while managing differences, multilateralism and democratization of international relations, and people-to-people exchanges. While in its early years, the People's Republic promoted communist revolutions and had a quasi yet troubled alliance with the former Soviet Union, by the early 1980s, China adopted an independent foreign policy with the stated goals of safeguarding world peace, opposing all forms of hegemony, and achieving economic modernization and national rejuvenation. It made sense. China needs a stable international environment to enable domestic development. Although today it would be a mistake to view China's diplomacy through the lens of U.S.-China frictions, China's diplomatic objective is to protect its 3 sacrosanct core interests: its political system, continuing economic development, and national sovereignty, territorial integrity. But President Xi also recognizes China's global responsibilities. Moreover, China's peaceful rise enhances global standards of living. The big question remains open. China at mid-century, moving towards center stage of the world. Will China assume the responsibilities and bear the burdens? And what then will be the China threat? In the next episode, we explore China's social development to be closer to China.